of access granted. I'm delighted to have Dominic Monkhouse on the sofa. I've known Dominic for it must be 6 years, 7 years, when I started out in business.
10.
10. 10. But definitely somebody I've admired from afar, and any time I spend time with you, I really enjoy it. So I really appreciate you being here.
Good to be here.
I think it's nice to start off with, you've been a successful CEO, you're an author, you're a podcaster. So I guess my first question is why don't we start off with your origin story?
Okay.
Where does Dominic Monkhouse come from? Just give the audience a little bit of a synopsis of yourself.
How long do you want?
Let's go with half an hour.
I'm from Newcastle, so we're the lads, but then spent my working life going south. Worked for M&S, worked for Glaxo.
What were you doing for M&S?
I was on their graduate trainee program in stores. So in my early 20s, I had 65 middle-aged women working for me and taught me a lot about management. You cannot tell 65 middle-aged women what to do. You have to somehow get them to do what you want them to do without telling them.
Well, that's a nice life lesson to be learning at 25.
Yeah. So that was good. M&S is one of those... I just thought it was a great... If I think back now and look, where am I now? I'd worked my way through university working in a pizzeria, and then did retail, where there's a sort of, maybe it's a cliche, but retail is detail, and that's one of those things that stuck with me all the way through. You have to obsess about some things, and you have to be your team have to know you're obsessive about a few things, and I think that's a lesson that I learned at M&S. Was that through their training program, or you were just picking that up on the job? What they found was that the best managers could make a difference to about 5% of the revenue of a store. So they put their best managers in their big stores, and these managers were obsessive. I mean, they were real characters. So the guy in Newcastle, for example, said M&S should sell flowers, and the head office were like, no, we're not selling flowers. We don't want to do horticulture. So he got somebody to paint a corner of the store green, and he sent somebody down, and they bought flowers, and he found a way to put them through the tills, and they started selling flowers. And he's like, look, you see, we make loads of money on flowers. It works.
Yeah,
and so
nice.
Head office had to say, so their bigger stores had, even for a company like that, had entrepreneurial characters running them. Manchester, the guy who ran Manchester would rush round in the store just before opening time, and if people had clothing trolleys or trucks full of clothes that they were replenishing the Lutons with, he'd push them over because he wanted the store to be completely ready for business at 9 o'clock. And if they weren't, he would just be manic, and he'd throw things around, and people would be terrified of him. So, everything was always on, open perfectly at 9 o'clock. Nice. So how long were you at M&S before you moved? 2.5 years. Okay. And then what did you do after that? I went around the world. Travelled through Southeast Asia, ended up in Australia, got a job in IT selling stuff. It was 286 machines, Windows 1, Word for Windows 1.1a. I mean, this was like a beginning of computers. They weren't connected to the internet. The internet didn't exist. So this is pre-1989? Yeah. This is... 1991. 1991, I was in Australia. Okay. What made you want to go and travel? Was that something that was always on your radar? Yeah, I just had. You had enough of managing the 65 middle-aged women. I just thought I'd quite like to travel around the world, and that would be a good thing to do. And then I got a job in sales, and I've been in sales all my life, and I've been in IT for most of my life since then. So that had a big impact. Okay, so you're in Australia doing sales. How long were you out there for? 12 months. Okay. Well, then back to the UK? Then came back to the UK via Southeast Asia again. And then I worked for Glaxo, selling drugs in Sheffield. Okay. How was it working for them? It was good. So, I'd done sales in Australia, but didn't have any formal sales training. I'd sort of made it up, and had a bit of coaching from Neil Jackson, who was my sales manager at the time and still a friend of mine. Big shout out to Neil in Sydney, if he's listening. I'm sure he is. But he's now an accomplished artist. When I met him, he was a brummie that had got somebody given him a job when he'd arrived in Australia. So he gave me a job because he thought he was somebody'd helped him out, so he'd help me out. And I wanted some blue chip sales training. So Glaxo was good on the CV, and then I thought, M&S was good on the CV. I wanted another blue chip company on the CV. So I got and did another sort of 2.5 years with Glaxo.
Okay, what's it like working for Big Pharma, and how was that structured in terms of what you were selling? What's the sales?
So I was, you get very niche. You've got to be able to have certainly when I was there, you had to be able to have a conversation so that the doctors that you were talking to saw you as an expert in the thing that you were talking about. So I was doing asthma care. So it was a 5-week training course before I was allowed to go and talk to a doctor. And then subsequently I moved into the hospital team, and then you're talking to chest consultants. And there was another 7 weeks of training. So you had to read and learn a load of clinical papers. You had to be able to have a conversation with a chest consultant and be able to
hold your own.
Hold your own, add value, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things I did is I brought the chest consultants together across Sheffield and helped orchestrate a new asthma care guidelines for Sheffield across the hospitals that existed in Sheffield at the time. And, that allowed me to then be, I suppose, entrepreneurial, even within a large company. But some of the stuff that I did just drove me demented, and it's just like, you can't complain about that. It's above your pay grade.
Oh, really?
Well, I was doing an MBA at the time, and I did a thing called multiple linear regression. So you get a whole load of data points, and you go, which things in this data drive which things in the data? So they said, okay, Glaxo have launched this new asthma care drug, and our guidelines from head office is to go and see the customers that currently prescribe our other asthma care products and get them to move from the old product to the new product. But when I looked at the data for Sheffield, what I saw was that wasn't what ever happened. What happened was GPs who were keen to prescribe new products prescribed all of the new products. So I went to my boss and I said, look, what head office are telling me to do makes no sense. These guys our current prescribers are conservative GPs. We're losing out to AstraZeneca because they've got this new product. Our existing customers are not prescribing their new product. They won't prescribe our new product either. And he said, how do you know that? I said, well, because I've done multiple linear regression analysis on all of this data. Here it is. And he's like, it's above your pay grade. This is what head office have told us to do. So you just need to do what head office has told you to do.
So that must have pissed you off, and that's...
Well, I just ignored him completely. and did what I thought.
Is that a trait of yours, is it?
Yeah. Like, that's rule breaking, taking risks. I think that's what makes entrepreneurs different from most people. That's why often entrepreneurs struggle at school. And the fact that lots of them have ADHD or dyslexia. But, the fact that in their heads, it's like, I'm being told to do something that makes no sense. Yeah. So I'm just not going to do it. And then, of course, you fall of Mr. Johnson's.
Okay. So, let's move on then from GlaxoSmithKline. So you're there for a couple of years as well.
Yeah.
And then what's next?
Then I went to work for a gold and diamond jewellery manufacturer.
Okay.
We were the largest seller of gold and diamond jewellery in the UK. Ratner's had been our biggest customer.
That's a famous story, isn't it?
Indeed, until Gerald said it was all a load of shit.
Yeah. So were you in that industry whilst he said that?
No, I joined just after he'd said that. And they, at the time, were our largest... They had been the company's largest customer.
Okay.
I turned up, and at the point I arrived, Argos, Elizabeth Duke, was our largest customer. Our motto was more flash, less cash. So we made stuff out of gold alloy that was thinner and bigger and had a lower breakage rate than other people's. And so I think at the time they turned over about 88 million. So we got jewellery into Woolworths, we got jewellery into M&S. I sold jewellery into all of the catalogue retailers.
Okay.
Did that for about 18 months. And then...
Another predominantly sales role.
It was a sales role, so key accounts director, so to our 12 largest clients. So not any of the high street retail jewellery stores, but all of the other key accounts. And it taught me an interesting lesson, which was that I had thought salespeople could sell anything, but I realised that you had to like the customers and you had to like the product, and I didn't. Those two things weren't true about jewellery and the jewellery buyers.
No, fair enough. I think that's a really true story, isn't it? Around the sentiment around a salesman believing in what they sell.
Yeah.
To be really good at it, you have to, I definitely have noticed people when I'm around them, if they really believe in it, it really transfers across to the consumer. They're like, okay, that level of energy really brings more business.
We were, as a company, our success was that we solved problems for retailers, because we would take a price point of $9.99, $19.99, $999, whatever it was, and we'd engineer back from there a product that met their requirements to make, 50% margin on things that they were selling. And we would engineer it so it was spot on. I mean, our net margins were about 5%. So we weren't making a ton of money for the effort that we were putting in. But, we could engineer a gold product to meet a particular price point. I just wasn't interested in doing it.
No, fair enough. Just on the Gerard Ratner story, like, what's your make of that?
Oh, I think like everything else, he had said that many times before.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's slow news day.
So I guess for the audience, I guess we should probably put it in context a little bit. So here's a guy that's the CEO of a big jewelry business, right?
The biggest one in the UK, grown really fast. Aggressively driving down the price of jewelry to make it more accessible so that people could have gold jewelry as almost as a fashion accessory rather than an investment. And, it just exploded on the back of technology shifts, laser chain machinery that was invented in Japan and then moved to in loads of stuff made in Italy for us. And we made loads of stuff in the jewelry quarter in Birmingham, and then we put in a load of engineering as well. Used to get a thing called a hoop earring, and it was 17 manual tasks to make a tube earring, put in a hinge, put in another thing. And, we built a robotics machine. We had some guys who'd been in the aerospace industry, built a machine that you just put gold tubing and gold wire in, and it spat out hoop earrings. So we just were meticulously aimed our price point at putting our competitors out of business over and over and over again.
Yeah. But then Gerard Ratner, the guy that was a competitor, stands up at a conference, right, in front of hundreds of people at the time. Ryan saying that, or however many people, and basically says our products are crap.
Why are they so cheap? Because they're crap.
Yeah, and then his whole business just tanks overnight.
Because he just destroyed the brand. Took away the myth, even though the myth was probably teetering on the edge, and everybody really knew that what he said was true. Yeah. Once you say it, then the bubble bursts.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing how quickly that story, kind of from a business perspective, how quickly your reputation can be down the toilet.
Yeah. Well, and then nobody wanted to be
associated to them.
Shopping at Ratner's. So off they went to shop at Elizabeth Duke.
Yeah, shop at your place. Okay, so we've gone from M&S, we've gone, travelling to Australia, we've been in sales, we've come back, GlaxoSmithKline, then we're into jewellery. Okay, what comes after jewellery?
Then I went to work for a company called Meditel, who had put the computer systems on doctors' desks. So we had about a third of the GPs in the UK used our systems. So that was 3.5 years supplying IT into healthcare. Okay.
All sales again?
All sales again. Sales and marketing. And one of the things I did while I was there was we did a bigger reset. We took the company down from 220 people to about 99 people because we weren't making any money. So that was my first big, restructure project.
Yeah, it's a huge restructure, isn't it? I'm looking for... Yeah, go on.
No, go on.
No, I'm looking forward to getting into all of your wisdom and your tips and tricks. And I guess you've been through a lot of experience and stuff. I just want to go quickly through the journey today in terms of your career, and then we'll get into this book. And
one of the other transformations I did is we put in a CRM system there. And then I moved from Meditel to a company called Sales Technologies, who were our CRM supplier, as their sales and marketing director. They got acquired in the dot-com bubble. I became managing director of the UK business. Dot-com bubble burst.
Yeah.
Interliant, which was the owner of that business, went off a cliff without decelerating. And so I jumped ship to a small company at the time. I was employee 120, a company called Rackspace. We took the UK business to 150 people and 30 million in 5 years. Then I did a turnaround at a company called IT Lab in London. I joined and we were losing £65,000 a month. We had 3 months to live. Turned that round, made that profitable. Then I joined a Canadian business that said, would you build us a competitor to Rackspace? So we put that in Southampton,
This is where our paths crossed, right?
Indeed, which I sold them on. Southampton is the Vancouver of England.
I remember you telling me that.
Which everybody laughs about in England, but nobody in Vancouver noticed. because it's got, Southampton's got the biggest container port in the UK, and it's got the biggest cruise terminal in the UK, and you've got the New Forest. So if you fly in from Canada or the US, as my colleagues did, then you just had, you landed at Heathrow, came down by taxi, drove down through the New Forest, and you thought you'd were in paradise. It was fantastic. So
great sales.
Yeah, fabulous. I should be working for Southampton Tourist Board. And ran that business for 5 years, served as the UK MD, then as Chief Customer Officer, then Chief Marketing Officer. It sounds like penguins on the roof, but it's only seagulls. We built the greenest data center in the UK in Portsmouth. And I mean, the business did, if you go on the internet and you look at a website, those websites have to live somewhere. Yeah. I mean, that's what the last sort of few companies I've worked for have done. And we had big air-conditioned sheds with those servers in. IT infrastructure, plumbers of the internet, really. We sold that business in 2013.
It's Pier 1 Hosting, right?
Pier 1 Hosting, yeah. We sold it in 2013, and I exited in 2014. Came back from the US and then left.
The exit of that company went for?
God, I got corrected on this the other day. It's 635 million Canadian dollars.
Wow. And how many people were in the business?
About 660 at that point.
Wow. That's a hell of a career today. Well, until that bit, and then tell us about the next bit after Pier 1. Bring us right up to speed.
Well, then I left Pier 1, and a couple of weeks after I left Pier 1, my daughter was born, Allegra. She's 9 in May, so I know how long I've been doing this for. And my wife said, look, why don't you work for yourself? So I thought, okay, I might do some coaching and some consulting before I get a proper job again. And here we are 9 years later, and I'm still doing coaching and consulting. The joy that I got from, if I think about Rackspace and IT Lab and Pier 1 and turning those businesses around, the biggest joy I get is from, you go and hire somebody. And so I remember at Pier 1, I hired a guy called Jason Vigas, and I met him at the Harbour Hotel in Southampton. Is it the Harbour Hotel? The one with a glass triangle.
Yeah, Grand Harbour.
That's it, yeah.
Harbour Hotel is a new one.
Yeah. So I met him there. We didn't have an office. Uh-huh. We didn't have a company. He's got a job. And after the end of the interview, he said, right, I'm joining. When do I start? And it's just, he was prepared to take a risk and join the company. And I just thought, God, this guy's amazing. Like, he's an engineer, but very quickly I can see that if we put the opportunities in front of him, he'll probably take them. And ended up being a director in our organisation very quickly, running 5 years later, he was a director in the business running a global team. And so it's fantastic to, the joy I got from seeing those people progress. Yeah. And I get the same joy from working with the entrepreneurial CEOs that I coach and their teams. They've got a vision, they want to change the world. How can I help them get there? Yeah. And get huge satisfaction from doing that.
So that's what you're up to now, right?
Yeah. Helping.
And you got a podcast. So talk to us quickly about the podcast.
So I wasn't going to do a podcast. Like, a podcast weren't even a thing for me. But I hired a lady called Louisa when a few years into coaching, because I did it a bit as a lifestyle thing, and then I thought, you know what, I'm bored now. I've got to get serious or get a job. So I thought I'll get serious at coaching. So I hired Louisa, and she was a former radio journalist, and she said, "Oh, you can't have a newsletter without a podcast." And so we started, and 8 weeks in, she said, "Working for you is not as interesting as I thought it was going to be." So it was like, okay, do I stop? Do I keep going? And I read at the time that the average podcast does 8 episodes, and I thought, well, I think we've done 8. We've got to keep going then, because I don't want to be average.
Yeah, most people give up after 8.
Yeah, and so here we are. I think 254 was what the guy said to me yesterday.
What's it called?
It's called The Melting Pot.
The Melting Pot.
And we get on entrepreneurs. We get on people who've exited, who've got a story to tell. And I get on business book authors who've got, I think, something that people can learn from. So we've had some fantastic people on.
Who would be, if for our audience that maybe haven't listened to the Melting Pot yet, top 3 episodes or 3 you think they should go check out?
It depends what your problem is. Because my idea is that entrepreneurs have challenges, and it's find your challenge, then go find. We've indexed it on the website, so you can actually search the episodes by challenge. But for me, I had a guy on called Tom Peters. So I remember doing my back when I was at university in the late 80s doing my business degree, I read In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters. And here's a guy who's a McKinsey consultant who's writing about culture, not about making more money, and about how actually you've got to get the culture right if you want to make money. So having him on was fabulous, one of my sort of all-time heroes. And then a tool that I've used in every business that I've had since he invented this tool, Net Promoter Score, NPS. Fred Reichelt was fabulous to get him on. And then probably Vern Harnish, because whilst I was at Rackspace, he wrote a book called Rockefeller Habits.
Uh-huh.
And
is he the guy behind Scaling Up?
Yes. And so then Rockefeller Habits, he rewrote the book, or wrote a second version called Scaling Up in 2014. And so I'm the sales guy, I'm the visionary, big picture, not so much attention to detail and management. And so I needed a manual that would teach me the things that are not intrinsic to my nature. And so I picked up the Rockefeller Habits while I was at Rackspace, and it's like, oh, this is brilliant. Here's a playbook for running a business and getting your company to do all of the things that are not inherent in my makeup. And so did that. And then I'm a scaling up coach. There's 200 and odd scaling up coaches around the world, and I'm one of them. So I've said to Vern a number of times that he's changed my life. I mean, he's probably impacted the economic growth of businesses more than anybody else alive. He sold 500,000 copies of his book. Entrepreneurs all over the world are using scaling up the methodology to build profitable businesses. And all of the jobs in any economy get created by scale-ups.
Yeah.
So when those businesses accelerate, what happens is if you're a mom and pop shop, you have economic cycles. You've only got a few employees. That never changes. If you've got a big company, those big companies, look at all the big tech companies, right? You have an economic downturn, they get rid of 10%, 15% of their workforce. And then as the economic cycle changes, they try really hard to automate and to outsource, to not hire employees as they go back on the upswing. Whereas the scale-ups, they have got a group of people and they want to hang on to them, and they know their people are their most important asset. So they try really hard to cut everything else and not people through tough times, and then they accelerate away in the good times. And so all of the jobs in any economy, more than half the jobs in any economy, get created by scale-ups.
Nice.
So you get to help create jobs.
Which is great, right? Really rewarding.
Yeah.
And I guess you're working with some really dynamic people. So that really brings us up to date now of where you are.
Yeah.
What an illustrious career, we say. Starting off with M&S and managing the 65 middle-aged women. Great grounding for you.
Yes.
In sales across the world, exited a huge company, built a huge company that then sold, obviously. Now you're coaching CEOs across the world, actually.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier, so internationally you got customers in, or clients in, from Thailand, right, to...
Philippines, Australia. We work with people in France, Spain.
Nice.
US, UK.
And you recently published this book.
I have.
Mind Your Fucking Business. The No-Nonsense Guide to Making Your Good Business Great.
Yeah.
Okay, talk to me about that. Shall I read the synopsis at the back?
If you like.
As we're here, and as I've got the author, if you want to scale your business quickly and have fun doing it, don't copy the tired approaches of big companies. Find out how to turn your existing leaders into A players and become 10 times more productive. Let's start with that one. I want to get all your words of wisdom for this. As somebody that's looking to grow their business and scale. So how do I turn my leaders into A players?
Well, you've got to define A player. Okay. So an A player is the top 10% of available talent for a given job in a given location at a given salary.
Strong definition, I like it.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So, and the reason you go for the top 10% of talent is because they're more productive, right? So I was talking to your colleague Chris earlier, and here's my analogy. If you're Alex Ferguson and you win the European Championships and you've got Wayne Rooney on your team, you don't say to yourself, next year what I need is somebody not quite as good as Wayne Rooney who's a bit cheaper than Wayne Rooney. You say, I'm going to go into the transfer market and I'm going to hire somebody better than Wayne because next year we've got to up our game.
Yeah.
I don't think most small business owners think like that. They think, I've got Mary, she's amazing. I'm going to hire somebody else who's a bit shitter and a bit cheaper than Mary, because hiring another Mary would be impossible. It's not. If Mary exists, unless Mary is a unicorn, you could hire another Mary. You should go and hire somebody better than Mary. It's just hard. It's not impossible.
Okay, so let's stick with that for a moment. So why is it you think that most small business owners think that way?
Because they're not thinking about investment, they're thinking about cost.
Okay.
But honestly, if you grow your sales, it has 8 times more impact on your profitability than managing your costs. So you should be looking to
grow top-line revenue. I've heard the quote there, like, sales cure all, right?
Yes, absolutely. We've got all these problems. Let's just sell more, and most of them.
And then you buy yourself time, and you've got resources to kind of like fix those problems.
I think, yes. I mean, people often go, certainly in there's effectiveness and efficiency. People who have an efficiency mindset go, oh well, we can't sell more until we fix the system, until we've I just go, look, why don't we go and sell it? See if we can sell into anybody. If we've sold some stuff to somebody, we can work out how to deliver it. We then have a success-based problem.
Yeah.
If you go and try and work out how to solve all of the problems that you might have in terms of doing the delivery before you've sold it, you're just spending there's a load of cost here. And then what turns out is that the thing you thought you were going to sell is not the thing that anyone wants to buy. So it's another fallacy where this sort of efficiency-based mindset says, we need to have perfect widgets before we sell them. Actually, your definition of a perfect widget and the person who might be prepared to pay you money for it are often very different. You see that all the time. That's why 65% of product launches fail. Right. Somebody makes a product and then says, sell a thing. And sales goes, it's the wrong thing at the wrong price. I mean, here's an example. At Pier 1, we had a product that we had built, which was a hosted exchange before you could buy Office 365 from Microsoft themselves. And I remember talking to a business in Hampshire called Cobweb and talking to Paul, who's the CEO, and he said, Dom, look, we used to sell this for $14 a mailbox, and when we took it down to $5 a mailbox, sales went through the roof because every CEO could do the maths on the back of a fag packet, and at £3.50, it was cheaper to buy it from us than it was to have your IT team do it. So I went back to Pier 1, I'm like, here's a secret sauce. I've spoken to the guys who are selling more of this than anybody else in Europe. And I said, so we need to sell it for $5, £3.50 a mailbox. And they went, we can't do that. There's $6.50 of solid cost in it. Because they hadn't built it to sell it. They'd built the ideal product.
Uh-huh.
And we never sold much of that. It was just a disaster. And I see that all the time. People find it very, very difficult to articulate to me, why does a customer buy from us and not from a competitor? And if you can't articulate that clearly, you can't build a sales and marketing plan and you can't scale your business.
In your experience, do you find that most companies don't have good crossover between their sales and marketing teams and their product teams where they're working together to kind of get this messaging right and also make sure they don't over-invest in the product where they have got £6 built into the cost?
I think there's a...
Is it a communication issue with inside organisations that is not helping people?
When you start, you've got an idea. So you started your business, you've got an idea, right? You're not big enough yet where you're not influencing your product. But quite often a business gets to a certain size and the product that they launched, which was the idea in the head of the entrepreneur, the business gets big enough that they need another product or the market shifted and they need a new product. And they have no skill in the business to work out what that new product should be. Okay. Because in the UK, the average entrepreneur who starts a business isn't a 22-year-old spotty oik in his bedroom coding in his underpants. He's actually somebody who's spent 12 years in industry learning the skills of their industry. And then they go, do you know what?
I could do this on my own.
I could do this on my own.
Is that because they're an A player?
That's because they're entrepreneurial, right? So they have a different perception of risk than... So I think it's about 5% of the world are entrepreneurs or could be entrepreneurs or are entrepreneurs. And they just have optimism and risk. That whole thing, it could all go wrong, that their mother says to them. They just go,
On optimism, I remember you told me a story once around something like, you're going to have to help me on this one. It was something like falling off a chair or like going out for an accident. So there was a mindset around people that are optimistic would have like less crashes or anything like that.
No, it doesn't at all. I love the idea of this being true, but I can't remember the story. Okay. I may well have told you, but I've forgotten along the way.
The sentiment was just be an optimist. It really helps you in your life.
I mean, there is a story that springs to mind. There's a book called How Full Is Your Bucket? Right? And in there, they looked at a call center in California, which I think had 5,000 people. It sounds more like a battery farm for chickens than a thing that human beings would work in. But when they looked at the data, they found a small number of people who every single customer they spoke to bought something else from the company. And they found another group of people, I think 9, who were so miserable that every single customer who spoke to these 9 people cancelled.
Yeah.
Right? And it was just so extreme. And so they would be better off paying these 9 people not to come in anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I've always had this thing that you just shouldn't have miserable people in your business. And quite often I meet people and they go, oh yeah, we've got one of them. We've got Joan or Fred, and they're just miserable. I'm like, get rid of them. Why are you still paying them? Right? And they're not their number one performer. If they were the number one performer, I'd describe them as toxic A's.
Okay, so I couldn't agree more, right? Just the energy, right? As an organisation, if just draining energy out of the organisation.
Yes.
I think being a leader on this and saying, actually, it's time for you to leave. It's not going to fit the culture that I'm trying to create. Fair enough.
Well, and often I think...
But I think there's just going on to the toxic A's.
Yeah.
So say, what would you do in this scenario then, when you've got your best performer is like smashing it from a sales perspective, bringing in revenue, but he's a dick?
Get rid of them. So in my experience, we do this work with clients all the time. Typically, I work with a client and they'll have somewhere, when we first start looking at it, they'll have somewhere between 10 and 35% A players. And they'll always have a couple of toxic A's. And they say, well, we don't really want to get rid of them because they are top performers. And I say, okay, well, that's fine. You got to tell them, you got to give them some feedback on their toxic behaviors, what's making them a dick. Why do people think they're a dick? Tell them. Be really, really, really clear. And often these people there's an EQ problem, right? So you're going to have to probably be really, really specific and very, very direct. You can't beat about the bush. Mm-hmm. And also you don't have very long, right? Because once you've told them they're a dick, the cat's out the bag, right?
Yeah.
So they've got to fix this quickly. In my experience, no client has ever had an employee that has been with the company in 6 months' time.
No.
We've told them. They've tried to change it. They come back after 90 days and the client's like, you know what? I think we've got the guy who's going to, prove the rules wrong. We've told him actually his performance is now still amazing and he's no longer a dick. And then they come back the next quarter and they go, no, he's a dick again. He's gone.
How often do you find that CEOs pander to the toxic A's?
Well, the thing is, your culture is what you are prepared to ignore.
So is this what you tolerate, you condone?
Totally. And the CEO is doing that. So you've decided that culture is important to you. Well, actually, you've decided that culture is not important to you because you're putting up with Fred and he's a dick.
Yeah. Well, this is where culture's set from the top, right?
Oh, CEOs and the leadership team cast a massive shadow. And, it makes me laugh sometimes. I'll have somebody rings me up and they'll say, Dom, my problem is accountability. And we start talking about and you see that the CEO has no accountability. And, unless he can change his behaviour or her behaviour, then he's probably not going to the team's probably not going to change.
Yeah.
And he probably or she isn't the person who should be leading accountability in the team.
In your opinion, how do the best CEOs lead?
It's all different. I mean,
give me maybe 2 traits.
I think the thing you've got to do is you've got to work out. I work with entrepreneurial CEOs, not professional CEOs. And so lots of the CEOs I work with are great with vision, great with excitement. They can be introvert, they can be extrovert, but what they need to do is they do have the great vision. I mean, I would say we use this tool called Working Genius, and often they've got invention and discernment, or invention and galvanize. So they are definitely inventors. They can dream up solutions to problems that customers have, which is the essence of their business model. They've got to work out what they're world class at and get to the point where they're only doing the things that they're world class at.
Okay.
And hire other people to do all of the other stuff better than them. And if they do that, they'll have more fun and they'll be more successful. So McKinsey did an amazing 10-year study looking at the performance of executives. And what they found was that if you spend your time, so what puts you in flow?
Me personally?
What do you do? And for you, time stands still.
I love vision. Do you know what I mean? Like thinking, big picture, being creative. And I love brainstorming, being around people. That definitely gets me in my pocket.
Fab. So if you could spend all of your time doing that,
yeah,
is that a job upgrade?
Yeah, no, I think that's where I need to be.
Yeah, right.
If I'm honest.
Yeah, totally, right.
Yeah. So I think if I've got the most amount of energy and I'm thinking about, I can create the most amount of influence and also move the needle the most for the organisation.
So what McKinsey found was that if executives are in flow, they are 500% more productive than people who are not in flow. So if you get the leadership team in your business in a job where they're in flow, then it's like compound interest. You're 5 times more productive every single day. You'll have done more work on a Monday or had more impact on a Monday than other people will have had by Friday. And that just every day, every week, every month, every quarter makes these businesses uncatchable. And then when you look at it at a team level, they published another study recently looking at the drug development teams in global pharma companies. What's interesting is the people who aren't amazing are delusional. I mean, they're not narcissistic or anything. It's just as human beings, I think we are hardwired to think we're at least average. We don't get up in the morning, brush our teeth and go, do you know what, you're shit.
Yeah.
So, like...
But some people do.
Well, yes, I feel sorry for them. But look, in the UK, 75% of men believe they're above average drivers, right?
Okay.
Right? And so you'd think, okay, so at a human level, we can delude ourselves. Gallup did a study where all of the C and D players in a company thought they were above average. Yeah. Right? And it also works in teams. This study that McKinsey did, 85% of the drug development teams thought they were above average. The top 1% was 10x average. And the next 2, 3, 4, 5 was 5x average in terms of bringing drugs to market. And so
this being a results game.
Yeah.
So the difference between being like delusional is I could want a yacht and a Sunseeker and I could think I'm good enough to, but the difference is actually going achieving the results to actually achieve it. The disconnect between like, it's cool to have like great ambitions and think I'm like the next big thing, but the difference is actually going and walking the walk.
Well, even knowing that there's a gap.
Yeah. Okay.
And then
so you're saying some people just aren't even aware of the delta between the two.
They think they're already amazing. They already think they're at least a B player.
Okay.
Right, and they are.
That's delusion.
They are because they're not curious enough to find out because they're self.
But you're getting market feedback all the time telling you.
Yeah, but they're self-satisfied enough to go, no, it's okay, or I'm unlucky, right? Jim Collins, though, when he did his Good to Great stuff,
that book.
He found that, the difference between, poor companies and great companies had the same luck. What the best ones had is they had a better return on luck because they'd set themselves up with a mindset and maybe a war chest, but like when an opportunity came along, they could execute it against it. And so opportunity is the same for everybody. It's just whether you see it or not. There's a great book about luck. God, I can't remember the title.
Do you think that could be taught or is it innate?
Well, so that's what this book about. This book is about could you teach people to be luckier? Yeah. Right? And
this is what you told me about.
Right, and so...
Going back to my original, ramblings.
So this one, what happens is they set up a scenario in a fake cafe in London. And they take this lucky guy and they go, our hypothesis is he will walk through the door, see the £50 note we've put on the floor, he'll pick it up, he'll buy a cup of coffee, he'll look round the room, he'll sit next to the guy that looks like he's a businessman and start a conversation because in his world, he just sees opportunity. Yeah. And then we take this unlucky lady and before she'd even got in the cafe, somebody else had come in and picked up the £50 note, right? It's like she exudes bad luck. So anyway, they put the £50 note back on the floor. She came in, stepped over it, didn't see it, bought a cup of coffee, and then sat down next to the businessman and they're going, oh no, the hypothesis is going to shit. She's going to talk to the businessman. No, she just didn't talk to him. Yeah. Right. So in her mind, she's the world is doing something to her, and actually it's all her mindset. And looking and spotting opportunity. And I think that is...
so that's environmental?
If your mum's miserable, you're miserable?
Yeah.
Could be. I don't know. But look, I think you probably could teach it. You could probably learn this if you perceived that it was a problem. Yeah. And I think the thing is that people often don't see it. They're not thinking.
Is that because you're saying people are just like sleepwalking through life and not being conscious of like themselves and how they interact with other people in the world?
So in the US, about 50% of people who have a heart attack kills them. The first heart attack kills them. of the other half that have had a heart attack but don't die, they obviously get advice from their doctor to change their diet, change their lifestyle. 85% of them don't. Right, so
just we're creatures of habit.
It's hard.
It is hard.
People just get stuck.
What's the last habit you tried building for yourself?
So Mosley, the guy who wrote the 5-2 diet, has written another book called 10 Habits to Change Your Life.
Okay.
And so he says what you've got to do is you've got to stack or replace. So every day you're busy.
Yeah.
So adding something in often doesn't work unless you take something out. So you've got to deliberately swap something or stack something. So you've got a 30% chance of being dead in a year over 65 after a fall. So you go, okay, well, how do you stop falling? Well, you've got to have better balance. So you brush your teeth every day.
Yeah.
So when you brush your teeth, do it on one leg. Do it in the left in the morning, right in the evening. You've worked on your balance every day for the rest of your life. It will reduce your chances of falling. Yeah.
But I mean, in perspective, how many people are going to think that way and then break it down in that way where they can be like...
But you see, that's...
Just even habit building itself, whether it's, James Clear or Atomic Habits or a few of these guys, like, build a habit on top of an existing habit that you've already got, like brushing your teeth, right? It is tough, isn't it, to go out there and build... we are creatures of habit. And what we're talking about, being more lucky or changing your mindset or changing your energy... It's real, you have to be really dedicated to personal development, don't you, to improve yourself from that perspective?
Well...
Disagree?
Well, you have to be curious, right? So, I've got some bone conductive headphones, right? And I listen to audiobooks. I get through 2 a week. I didn't used to be able to do that before audiobooks were a thing. Now it drives me mad if I find a book I want to read and it's not on Audible. It's like, why is this not on Audible? I'm going to actually have to buy the book and then I'll put it on the pile of 15 books I've bought that I haven't read yet.
Yeah.
Listen to a load of podcasts, because then I can, when I'm running, when I'm driving the car. I was listening to a book this morning on the way down here.
What are you listening to?
A book called Outlive by Peter Attia.
Okay.
It's a book about longevity.
Okay. Is that what your headspace is at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'm 56. I was 56 on Monday. Right?
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I've got 2 young children. They are 9 and 7, right? I'd like to see their children. So I need to live for a while. So longevity is a thing. And in the UK, the NHS isn't about prevention, right? So 50% of people in the UK get diagnosed with cancer because they end up in A&E, right? That cancer's been around for years. So I went and did a liquid biopsy last week.
Good for you.
So it's a blood test which screens for 70 types of cancer just from a blood test, right? I am taking charge of my health. I'm not waiting for me to be ill and then go and talk to the doctor.
Yeah. So that's, that having personal responsibility, taking responsibility for your life and yourself. Nothing more, I guess, empowering when you're doing these things. It sounds like I'm making excuses for people with habits. I'm not. I'm saying, but when you're talking about, when you do get locked into working on yourself, it's quite an energizing, empowering feeling, isn't it? You're learning all these things and you're taking responsibility for your life, and no one's going to solve your life for you, are they? No one's going to come and save you.
I think that's the difference between entrepreneurs and the other 95% of the population. Like, they're just happy to have a job and for somebody else to take responsibility for them.
Yeah.
They might be miserable about it.
Yeah.
Or not, but... people say to me, did you see that thing on TV?
Okay, so let's play this out. So why do we think we are like that? Why, like, when I think about myself, why am I like that? I think maybe... If I'm being honest, my dad definitely drove a load of self-belief into me as a kid, and I think that's the only thing I can kind of like say, by the grace of God go I kind of thing. Like, that's me being grateful for him and having a great dad. Yeah. I don't think I'm any different to anybody else from that perspective, but I definitely enjoy the feeling of like personal responsibility and being excited. I like the feeling that gives me. But anyway, that's me. What about you? Like, why are you that optimistic?
Maybe it's genetic.
Okay, so you think...
My grandmother was an entrepreneur. She had a chain of hairdressers, so I grew up in an environment where people were entrepreneurial. My uncle had a load of businesses, and I worked for him a lot as a kid. Remember being, 8 or 9, sweeping the floor in his garage, and then at university I worked in his restaurants. And so my dad ended up having his own business. So my mum had her own business. So, my parents... for most of my life, didn't have corporate jobs. And I went off and got corporate jobs and then went, you know what, I think small businesses are more my thing, where I can have some influence, and I don't have to do stupid things that people tell me to do that don't make any sense. I'm happy to do stupid things that I think make sense, but when I think it makes no sense and somebody tells me to do it and it's above my pay grade, or you don't get paid to think, you just get paid to do, it's like, gosh, it's just so depressing. But lots of people are comfortable in that environment.
Yeah. And that gives them the framework to go and, be a great mum, or, I think the game is happiness, right? Or for me, it's energy, your emotional bank account. And I could be really rich financially, but if you're happier than me, then you win. That's how I see it.
Well, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, how many clients
that's success at life, by the way. Yeah. It's not all about...
Look, I've built my business to allow me to take my girls to school every day. So when clients come and do work with me, they come down to the farm. We've built a facility on the farm where we can do strategic offsites for clients. And that allows me, even when we have days when we've got clients on the farm, it allows me to take the girls to school. And so, a few years ago, that was my decision.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me the other day, how many clients have you got? I said, enough. Because if I have too many, it impacts on the work-life balance that I've decided. I'm almost definitely earn more money if I was the CEO of a tech business, scaling another tech business again.
And then, you give up that side, don't you?
Yeah, so, I've made a choice. That's my choice. I'm very happy with it. It's working for me.
Nice. Good for you. Right, coming into not coming to the last question. I'm going to do one more question from the book, then I want to get into my quick fire round.
Okay, sure.
So, one of the bullet points at the back here, double your turnover every 12 months without throwing money at marketing.
Yeah. How?
Yeah, how?
Word of mouth referrals.
Okay. Give me some strategies for that.
So, Fred Reichelt, in his latest book, takes the concept of net promoter score a little bit further, and he said there's the concept of bought revenue and earned revenue. And so if you build an amazing brand and you have an amazing reputation and you generate referrals, all of that is earned growth. If you do PPC and you do advertising and marketing and outbound, then that's all bought revenue. And he said, the best companies in a commodity space, he said, look, if a customer moves from one supplier to another, 85% of that supplier movement can be attributed to a difference in net promoter score between the two companies. And so I think, one of our clients is a company called Smart Sourcing, based in the Philippines. They do business process outsourcing for SMEs in Australia. And they guarantee to make your outsourcing a success. And they know that you won't have any processes. So they come into your business through Zoom. They get you to show them what you want somebody to do in the Philippines. They document that. They hire somebody. They train them. And then they give you that person to do the job. They do no marketing. They're growing 100% year over year. Every client, on average, refers them 3 more clients. And so that is absolutely phenomenal business.
Right. It sounds like great business.
Yeah. So when we said, and they've got, if we wanted to build a business in the UK in terms of the plan, if we wanted to have 400 associates in the Philippines working for clients in the UK, we need to find 5 companies in the UK, because those 5 will become 15, those 15 will become 45, those 45 will hire 400 people in. And so, you can have a plan which says we need to double the business by finding 5 new customers. And it's like, okay, well, I could find 5 new customers. That doesn't sound that hard. And that's when I love it, where you can build a sales and marketing plan, which is, get really specific about whose problem are we solving, and then go find 5 of them.
Yeah.
Because that sounds much easier than just spending money on Google, hoping somebody randomly walks past whilst you're shouting, do you want some of this? Do you want some of this? Do you want some of this? Yeah. $9.99, half price, or whatever you're trying to do to drum up customers. Be laser focused on your jobs to be done.
Nice. Anything else in that chapter?
I think you've got to make sure that people aren't dropping out the back end.
Yeah.
So you've got to build. You've got to look at the customer journey and make sure that it doesn't spit customers out the back end unnecessarily. That there's a book called Watertight Marketing. If anyone's looking for a book by Bryony Thomas. That's a fantastic methodology which says if you've got no holes in your bucket, you need less in at the top. Mm-hmm. And again, it's about putting the customer at the heart of your business, and then marketing, not just about being responsible for new customers, but actually marketing being responsible for all the touch points in the customer journey.
Nice. I appreciate that. Always enlightening sitting down with you. Always learn a lot. Always stats. You're like the statistician guy. I love it. Books. So I'm going to get into my final 3 questions, okay? And you get 3 for each. Okay. So what are your top 3 book recommendations?
Blimey. I would definitely read Outlive by Peter Attia, which is just out last week.
Okay.
Because that will allow you to take control of your own health, like however old you are. Tells you exactly what to do, so that's fab. I followed his podcast for a long time. Business book, blimey, there's so many. Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. If you're an entrepreneur and you've got any type of business, then that's a book. It's a bit like the Reader's Digest DIY manual. You wouldn't necessarily sit down and read it cover to cover, but at any point in your business, if you have a challenge, you'd go in and there's a chapter and some case studies, and it'll just, and there's 50 books in there that it references, so you can go really deep in your challenge.
Yeah.
And a third one.
Well, it's got to be Mind Your Fucking Business, right?
You could say that. I couldn't possibly comment.
Let's go with Mind Your Fucking Business by Dominic Monkhouse's third recommendation.
Perfect.
Okay.
You won't be disappointed.
You won't be. Absolutely not. Top 3 pieces of business advice for a CEO that's trying to double the size of his company in the next 24 months.
I think you need to hire the best team that you can afford. And you are better off with fewer people, paying them a bit more, because a team of 7 A players will do more work than a team of 10 B players, and that is really hard for people to get their heads around. But that is, I've never found that not to be true. And when I turn up in a business that's a bit stuck, if we can increase the percentage of A players, then the business goes faster and is easier to run. So do that. You won't stall then. I think measure your employee engagement. I use a tool called Friday Pulse. It says every Friday, ask your employees every Friday, how happy were you at work this week? That's a question your employees can answer. But actually, in the first instance, what you're interested in is the response rate. World class is sort of 70% or above.
Okay.
And then what it does is it then every quarter does a bigger deep dive and tells you what you should do next to improve your engagement in your business. That's vital. And then I think Net Promoter Score, measure your customer satisfaction. Because if you don't know that your customers would refer you, which is the golden thread of scaling a business without sales and marketing expense, if you don't know that, then you're operating blind. And have that mindset that we seek criticism. So not that criticism is a bad thing, but 2 things that go hand in hand. I know this is a 4th one, but these 2 things go hand in hand, right? One is we seek criticism. So when we go and ask surveys, it's not about getting a high score so we can say how good we are. It's like, we've got a high score, we want a high score. Please tell us something else we could fix. And then in your employees, have no blame, right? So celebrate failure, right? So one of the things we had at Pier 1 is we had cock up of the month.
Okay.
And so every month people would say, this is what I cocked up this month. This is the mistake I made.
Yeah.
And, I remember Liam comes up and he goes, look, I was doing a thing at 2:00 in the morning and I made a mistake and I took the data center down. I know that really pissed off the customers and you all had to work really hard. I'm really sorry. Here's what we've done so that we can't make the same mistake. Liam, thank you for that. There's a bottle of champagne.
Mate, love that. Really love that. Cock up of the month.
Yeah. Because if you don't know about it, you can't fix it.
Yeah. And what you're reinforcing to the culture is, guys, look, let's come and just share that with everybody.
Yeah.
And make sure that we do learn from it. Yeah. And actually, this isn't an organisation where you have to hide those things.
Yeah.
This is an organisation where we're very open and transparent about our mistakes.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Top 3 experiences you've had in your life. You're a guy that likes to have a bit of fun, right?
I do, yeah. One of my personal values is adventure. I've been heli skiing a few times. So, land on the top of a mountain, ski down off-piste, that's fab. I have promised my wife I won't do it again. I got avalanched in British Columbia a few years ago.
Wow.
and luckily
you got through. You're here to tell the tour.
I got buried, and then because the slide was a big rock on the slope, it sort of split the slide, and I popped back up. So my friend Brenton Brown skied up to me and gave me a shovel and said he would video me whilst I dug myself out, which took about an hour, and I was absolutely bollocks at the end of it. So with 2 small children,
were you scared?
You know what? As I got buried, I just remember thinking, and now I reflect back, it feels very British. I just thought, God, this is inconvenient. And then I popped back up again. So it's one of these things that like time sort of stands still. I'm standing on a mountain.
Yeah.
Absolutely stationary, and then the next thing I'm moving very fast down the mountain. And this, when you look at the video, you can see the fracture line and the crack in the slide. But
how far do you drop in from the helicopter?
Well, you land the helicopter and then you climb out, get your gear out.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's number 1, or one of the 3. We won't rank them.
I think for 10 years, a couple of mates and I had a racing yacht, and that was great fun because I played rugby until I was 50 latterly for a local team, Lymington Mariners, which I was one of the founders of. But
what was your position?
Flanker.
Okay.
Number 8, sometimes wing.
Versatile.
Yeah, old, slow, but can tackle. Yeah. So in my 30s, I thought I need a team sport that has adrenaline that I don't get from ever. I mean, I've tried golf a couple of times and thought I couldn't think of anything I'd rather not do again. So we had a racing yacht. We raced that for 10 years. That was a ton of fun. That was always scary and always fun. Good thing to do as a team. Number 3, I'm just back from a long holiday with my kids. We did a week with a client in the Philippines, and then we spent 3 weeks in Bali over Christmas, and that was fab. So, anything I do with them is great. But we went swimming with elephants.
Wow!
And so these Sumatran elephants were rescued about 20 years ago by a family who live in Ubud in Bali. And so they have this sort of elephant sanctuary. So you go down and you can scrub the elephants. We did that, give them a scrub because they like to be scrubbed. And then you jump on their back and they swim and you're on the back. So the only thing above the water is your head and you're on the back of this elephant. And the kids just thought that was fab.
Yeah, what memories for them, right?
I thought it was fab, yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I've done some sailing, but I haven't done the heli skiing or the swimming with elephants, so I'll definitely have to add that to the list. Really appreciate your time today. But my final question before we wrap up is, Dominic Monkhouse, you get to have a dinner party. You get 3 guests, dead or alive. Who would you pick?
I might go with UK Prime Ministers.
Okay.
Right, so I want Liz Truss there. Right, so in person, is she as friggin' mental as she seems from having, seen all that carnage unfold?
Yeah.
Right, just want to make my own opinion. Tony Blair, invading Iraq, that was a disaster. Would you have done that again? And then Winston Churchill, because, prickly character. Not everybody liked him, but definitely a hero. So that could not be a dull dinner party.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Well, Dominic Monkhouse, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. I'll have to get you back again in the future. Delighted. Always love spending some time with you. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for listening. Until next time, keep smashing it. Bizpedia out.